Hello there, my name is Jason Boswell, the Product Manager for Core Data Discovery and Risk Insights, and welcome to the 25.2 update and the Technical Awareness webinar. Okay, let's get into it. So, as usual, let's start with the schedule. This is the second quarter release of the year. It's on schedule, came out of engineering late in April, and the demo system has been updated. The production systems will be updated through the month of May. These are, as always, these are provisional dates. These are the things that we have planned for our production customers. I would recommend you'll get an email once the formalized date has been firmed up. Okay, so let's now get into the details of what's in the release. Okay, so first of all, let's just cover the highlights, and then once we've done the highlights, we'll get into the detail. This release includes some enhanced support for extended ECM, Exchange, and Google Drive. So I'll talk about some of the details of those. We've improved the analysis to increase the accuracy of the results. And reduce the number of false positives. So that's in some extra options about what you can do with the grammars. Some data process enhancements to improve the efficiency and speed of scanning. So again, these are more the options about how you can then adjust some of the values to improve that speed. We've got a new workspaces mode. So workspaces in the manage section. So this new mode will improve and enhance and give further options about how you go about managing your data. It also, interestingly enough, it also helps us make the general speed of the system quicker as well. So not only are we giving you more options, but we're also making the system more efficient and improve the scanning processes and the tagging processes. And finally, there's a number of elements in the UI that have been, which I'll call out, that have been enhanced. But one particular is about how we display and output audit reports for deleted items. I think in the last release there was options so we can show you the audit details, but you had to process them through the API. You had to output them through the API. Now there's an element of doing that through the UI. Okay, so let's get into the details. Let's start with the enhanced support for extended ECM, Exchange, and Google Drive. So for extended ECM, in the previous version, you had to, when you set up your data set, you had to basically analyze all of extended ECM all in the one go. So you couldn't have the separate data sets and manage your data in subsets, and control the scanning process, decide the scanning options, which grammars you want to use in different areas, whether you want to do metadata or full scan. So now these are separated by nodes, and you can put in one or many nodes into the dataset configuration now, and therefore you can create multiple data sets for extended ECM sources. Okay, so this item ID or node ID can reference a workspace, and the default is in enterprise, a folder, or a container. We've also added the ability to scan data sets for an individual mailbox. So you could do that in the past release, but it was kind of tricky to do because you had to then create a group for each one. We've still got the option, as you can see on the right hand side. When you're creating a new source for Exchange, you can base it on a predefined user group, and that user group could be synchronized with your Active Directory groups, or you can base it on individual mailboxes now. So that makes it a bit easier so that you can filter for an individual mailbox based on that, because it was a little bit tricky to filter based on individual mail. You could query based on the email address, but you could be a sender or a recipient, or just even a mention in the email. But now if you do create a data set at that level, you know that all the documents, all the emails in that data set are related to an individual mailbox. We've also added support for sending documents to Google Drive. Previously, we had Content Manager, File System, any SharePoint orientation, Extended ECM, Documenter, but now we've got Google Drive as our target now. So you can set that now as a target. So you can do data classification operations into Google Drive locations. The actual details of the locations you can see in the help file, how you define those. I won't go into that now, but all those details are in the help file. The second new feature includes exclude patterns that enable you to reduce false positives. So if you look at a little example on the right-hand side here, as a business, I'm looking for documents that contain sensitive data. So I'm looking for documents that contain emails, but then there's going to be a lot of documents that contain our own company emails. So what you can now do is just look for the email addresses that are perhaps external and ignore the internal email addresses. So we're going to continue to use, if you look down the bottom here, you can, I've given an example of email addresses because I think that's the easiest one to kind of understand. So in email addresses here, I've said anything that starts with any numbers. And so this uses a Lua pattern that's similar to custom grammars. So the exclude pattern, so we can put anything at the front and then has got at opentext.com at the end. I will say don't recognize that as an email address. And you can see at the top it said, you can see in the grammars here it hasn't recognized this one, and you can see in the text it hasn't recognized this one as an email address. Now you can do this for a number of the out-of-the-box grammars, of course, and I think in the help file there's an example of one that you could perhaps do for phone numbers, like include all your company phones or your internal phone numbers, exclude those as a pattern out. So you need to choose, the exclusions work for things where a pattern relates to the one. So email addresses and phone numbers are good ones to use, and addresses you could use as well. So this will enable you to sort of make this more accurate about searching for these patterns, and kind of reduce those kind of false positives where they relate to internal addresses or internal things that you perhaps you have data related to and inside your organization. This was requested by some customers, and so we're pleased that we can meet this requirement. We've been adding some of the features, and some of this has come in some of the patches as well. So where you can improve the agent configuration to improve the scanning speed. What we're finding was that when we do a full scan of data, we will try and do a full scan of every single file that we recognize. And one of the advantages of KeyView is it understands so many different file formats. But there are actually lots of different file formats that are perhaps very large and very textually dense. But we know they don't contain any sensitive data. So now you can specify these options of extensions not to extract. So there's some default ones there, perhaps MSA files, MSP files, CAB files, WAR files. You can say, well, I know there's not going to be any sensitive data in these, so I'm going to gather the metadata on these. So we're still scanning these, but we're not going to try and crack them open and look for the text within inside these files. This is an agent setting, and you're welcome to edit these settings. The default ones are in there, that's out of the box. Okay, so by doing that, it means that we were finding that some of these were actually slowing down some customers large because it was spending a lot of time processing some of these files, and it was data processing that we didn't need to do because we knew those file types didn't contain any sensitive data. So these are options to ignore these. So this can dramatically improve your scanning speed. We've also put some advanced configuration into the agent UI that specifies a blackout period. So if you've got some customers that we're finding that during a certain periods, we need to stop the agent processing, stop any work doing while perhaps a backup or something is running. So these blackout periods actually override what's defined in the agent clusters and will definitely not do any processing during this time. Some more general data processing enhancements. We update the grammars with every release, and of note here are some new grammar rules for Thailand. You can see them in here. At the same time, VAT number is still a grammar rule, but customers have said that, that isn't, the VAT number is publicly available, so it shouldn't be part of the grammar set, but it's still there. So we've removed it from the built-in grammar sets, the VAT number. Some enhancements to the way we work with structured data manager. The URL format has changed with MySQL. So just some details of that there. I won't read that out. For databases that are based on custom adapters, you can now edit the custom adapter configuration fields even after the data's been scanned, which was, I think, an important change to make, because often you might have some of the configuration, authentication details, path details in there. So it's important that we were able to allow customers to change those. We've updated some of the labels to be a kind of a more accurate description. So processing was a bit too vague. So because this was actually the first date that it was scanned, so, and the last processing date is the last date that it was scanned. So because you can actually do some processing that's not based on scan, so if we've kept some of the stored content, we've tried to make these labels more accurate and more intuitive. There is better handling of distribution of work on the cloud-to-cloud processing agents. So this is the cloud cluster. And we've added a spinner now to the custom grammar rule test. So this wasn't a problem really for easy tests, but the more complex tests, what was happening was it was running the test, but it wasn't telling you it was doing some work in the background. So we've added a spinner now just to tell you that it's doing some work in the background when you're doing the more complex grammar rule tests. On to analyze. Now the grammar confidence score now is displayed in where it's defined in the search criteria. So that might be in workbooks, or it might be in some of your tags. That's where you define that search criteria. So now before it wasn't displayed, but now the confidence score is actually displayed. This is a customer request, the ability to copy and paste multiple values into the search builder. So this is useful if you've got a number of IDs. Before you had to just type them in manually. Now you can copy and paste multiple items in there all in the one go. When you click on the link on the view icon on the sensitive heat map, before it used to, when you look at the actual documents, it take you to use it with inside the same tab, but now it opens that on a new tab. So this is more of a usability thing, so you can flick between the heat map and the documents and keep checking the data. And we've added a little more detail to the total number of items identified by grammar. So and then it gives you this percentage detail here. So now we can know when you're trying to look at particularly trends, you can see exactly how many of them were scanned. So under here, you can then monitor this trend of this 3.2% of these items, and you can look at the trend in terms of the details here, because we're comparing actual item against the total number have been scanned over time. Okay, onto the new workspace. We're now moving into manage, and this is quite a big change, but it's something that has been requested. So before, particularly the ability to refresh query workbooks, but we've also gone for even further than that and put the whole workspace into a manual refresh mode. And manual refresh will be more of a default we suggest going forward. So manual refresh means that when the workspace is created, all the documents are put into the workspace, and then you've got control about, after a scanning process has been running, when you want that workspace to be updated with those new documents that have come in from an updated scan process. So it really puts the customer into control. So when you're creating your new workspace now, you've got the option of a refresh type. So the automatic refresh is the existing one. That's what the existing workspaces work like. But now you've got an option to set the refresh mode to be a manual refresh. Okay, and this can be set on a new workspace as you're creating one if you're not using a template, or you can set this at the template level so that you can always make sure you're in one mode or the other for your users who are using the templates. So the manual refresh mode, once you've set it, you cannot change it after the workspace has been created. You can't flick between these. Once it's created, these are then grayed out. When you select the manual refresh on the workspaces, it will refresh the items that are in the workspace. So anything on the the overview panel, the content panel, all the tagging and the panels, but also the workbooks are updated as well. You do need to make sure you have the correct permissions. So you need the manage workspace permissions to be able to update them. And I noticed this, I didn't have the refresh button at first until I'd had that permission. Dynamic workbooks don't make sense for the manual refresh because basically dynamics are basically an automatic refresh mode. So they only make sense, these dynamic query workbooks, that you in the automatic refresh. So you cannot create them in the manual refresh mode. And we do tell you the last time it was refreshed. So on the properties down the right hand side, you can see the properties down here, the time it was last refreshed. And to start refresh, you just hit the refresh button. Automatic refresh are the existing ones, okay? And these are updated based on the criteria that you've defined. You can put data requests limiting the criteria, so like topic-based ones or the data subject access requests in the automatic refresh ones. And workspaces that exist prior to this release are set to automatic refresh because this was the existing mode. So we feel this is quite a powerful feature. It also means that when customers are using the manual refresh mode for their documents and their workspaces, it means when you're scanning, the scanning actually will be quicker because it's doing the processing on the analysis, but it's not trying to put them into the workspaces and doing all the workspace logic to see if it meets or any of the workbooks. So in the manual refresh mode, the scanning updates are under your control. So what I'll probably recommend, if you do have lots and lots of workspaces and you are still scanning data, the manual refresh mode is probably the better mode for you. Okay. Particularly if you want to keep an open, if you have lots of them or you keep them open a long time. The automatic refresh is still useful, but perhaps you might want to have a smaller amount of these and perhaps don't keep these open as long, and that will really improve the whole performance of your overall tenant. So it looks like a small change, but this actually has a large impact on the overall processing and it really improve the performance of your tenant if you use these modes correctly. There are some further enhancements. You are now able to delete closed workspaces, but be careful to make sure you set the permission. There's a new permission here, delete any workspace. And by default, during the update, no one will have that permission. None of the roles have that permission. So, carefully add this permission to your appropriate role, and then you'll be given to have this button here that says, are able to delete a closed workspace. For the workspace list item, your preferences in the column selection are now saved in the browser until the browser cache is cleared. We've improved the handling and display of a large number of grammar rules. We're finding customers lots of grammar rules are displayed in the content panel. In the workspace list, we've merged the indicator that a logged in user has a review pending. So before it was at the top, and now you can see it as a status column. So it's a bit more usable inside the workspace list if you try to look if you've got an action to be compared against. We update the label for deduplicate workup option. It used to say compare against official records, which is perhaps what you would normally do, but because customers may not have a record system or using a record system, and they may be using a file system, so they may want to choose the better title really is compare compare it against master records. In addition, the document ID of the master record, so this is in the details panel, is now displayed. And now we've also added the ability to remove stored content from all documents with inside a workbook. So this enables you, because stored content and extracted grammar values is you might want to do this on a temporary basis, but in previous version, if you wanted to basically go back to more of a lean index mode with some of your data and remove the stored content and remove the grammar values, but perhaps keep the tag in, you didn't have an option to do that. So now there's a new drop down. So in file analysis, there's the other option there is to analyze that content, and the other one is to remove that content. So this gives you the ability to remove these two elements from selected data, and because it's inside a workspace, you've got total control of what data you want to remove here. Okay. Okay. Something that we added in the last release was the ability, we were storing the audit details of deleted documents, and we were able to access that inside the API. Now in this release, you can actually do that through the UI as well as the API. So wherever you've got this search button here, which is in Analyze and Manage, there's a new option to view deleted documents. As you know, when you view those deleted documents, you get a list, pretty much like it's down here. So there's a reduced amount of metadata here, so it is talk about when it was created, but you don't have any of the we've got the base metadata here, but we haven't got anything else really. So but it does tell you, which is really important for your auditing, is that who deleted this data, what was the reason, what workbook it was operating in, and the actual name of the deletion workbook. So that's available wherever you see the deleted documents detail, which could be in Analyze. But it's particularly useful when you're in a workbook, and then you can click on, from each of the workbooks, you can go down and see which documents are deleted. And when you click on this link here, it not only shows you the amount of documents you've deleted and the number of documents you deleted. If you click on them, it'll tell you the details of each one of the paths of the documents deleted. And from there, you can run your exports and export these details out if you want to, at any point, run an audit of the deletion actions that were done, why they were done, and who did them. I suppose, and the date that they were done as well. So you've got the full audit tracking here available. Now there has been, given that there has been some changes to the API, particularly around what we used to be. For those who might remember, we used to have a data source inside as an object inside a workspace, and we've kind of deprecated that really, and so that given more flexibility. So now you can add a data set directly into workspace, and it made it much simpler for users. But as we've done that, you have to reflect that now with inside the APIs. So all of these APIs here, and I won't go through them in detail, but basically reflect changes in the features of the product. But if you have used any of these APIs, any integration code or scripting, as you following the update, you will have to rework this code. But wherever we've removed the API method, there's now a relevant method that you can do to do exactly what you need to do before. Okay, so I won't go through all of these details, but all these API details basically reflect the new features and usage of the product. But if you need to know any more details about these new methods, just go to your tenant after it's been updated, and you can see the descriptions in the Swagger UI. Onto the administration. There's only one real major change, which is the name of the permission. So the permission really hasn't changed. The access permissions haven't changed. It's really just the label. So the label now more reflects the actual details of what the data is, what relates to this permission. And finally, there's a number of fixes that happen in the product. So there was actually too much for us to for me to add in terms of this slide. So if you and what we're trying to do inside if you click on this link or go down this path, it will take you to the documentation, and on the release notes will be published there in due course. I don't think they're there just now, but they will be done in due course. Inside the release notes, you'll see all of the fixes, and if it relates to a support case that was raised, the support case number will be on there too. So I'm pretty sure that takes us to the end. Thanks very much for your patience, and I'll see you next quarter. Thanks very much. Bye for now.